issues with that, so I'm just going to go there. Now this isn't actually working. We've just come to the end of the... one second. Let me just... yes, here we go. Okay, yeah, so we've just come to the end of day 5 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 3 Phase 1. We've been listening to more from Dennis Ben Gunn, the former Commissioner of the Special Branch from 1988 to 1991. I'm joined with Eveline Lubbers of the Undercover Research Group and Dave Morris. What did you make of what we've heard today, Eveline?
It's difficult to say. He was very full of himself, he was very arrogant, and he was very angry about what the inquiry, and no one of us seems to understand that the SDS in fact did a great job. He was apparently not very aware of proportions, because he said, that thing about relationships, that I wasn't aware of it at all. I only heard about it when it came out, and he kind of wanted to say it didn't happen on his watch, or he didn't know about it at least, although there's files showing that he was made aware. And also we've been doing some calculating, and I think he was there for like 3 or 4 years out of maybe 14, 15 undercovers that were active on his watch, as he says. 10 had relationships. So, saying that most of his undercover officers did a great job and delivered great intelligence, there was some stuff ongoing that he wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I mean, he kept coming back to this idea that the majority of the SDS officers did a wonderful job. He was at pains to repeat that the inquiry wasn't covering that enough. We weren't hearing enough about it. What did you make of it, Dave?
Yeah, he did say at the very end that he was really angry that they'd been thrown under a bus by the current commissioner, who described the whole unit as dysfunctional, and when it clearly has been from the beginning. So what I thought was really useful was he kind of blamed everybody except himself, all the people, well, especially the undercover officers, the ones that went off-piste, which seems to be the vast majority, and he blamed those higher up. Basically, they were doing what the government wanted, the Home Office, the security services, which I think is absolutely right. I think we've been saying that from the beginning, that this actually wasn't a rogue unit. This was a unit that was, that the people at the very top of the tree were, it's political policing, and that's what they wanted. And they were willing to turn a blind eye to all of the disgusting behaviour and tactics that went on. So I was quite... it was coming from him as a commander who was in touch regularly with those higher up as well, and the security services. Then I think that's pretty much, our case.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of his narrative really kind of fed into exactly what we've all been saying for many years. He was asked extensively about the process of undercover police officers lying to courts, misleading the court. He says, yeah, absolutely, that he was aware of the Home Office guidance that said that wasn't what they should be doing, but it was only guidance, and he took a principled stand.
Pragmatic stand. Pragmatic was his favourite word.
Yeah, he said pragmatic a lot of times. He said principled about his stance in terms of them misleading the court. He said that it was a principled decision to tell John Dines to skip bail after he was arrested at the poll tax demonstration on the 31st of March 1990. He got really angry as well about the use of Operation Hearn. He felt that the inquiry shouldn't be using the information from Operation Hearn because that was for something else, not least because he lied to Operation Hearn and had since come clean on the things he lied about there. I think it's fair to say there was a lot today that he claimed not to remember that I'm pretty sure he did, just from other things he said.
Operation Hearn was like the first review of what had gone wrong, and one of the first. And he claims that the officers that were interviewed were not told that it would be used elsewhere. I'm not sure if I
to lie as long as I knew it couldn't go anywhere else.
I'm speaking, please. Sorry. Yeah. So he also says that he never signed anything, or he doesn't remember, or he never saw what was written down. So he feels very aggrieved that that is now used and being held against him. Well, this was like, they say whatever they want to say if they think it's not being used any further. So there's more likely to be near the truth than anything else they have prepared for now. And yeah, today was so obvious that the entire Scud case of, an officer who went AWOL and was found under a bridge somewhere and had to be saved from there. His handwriting, his signature, and his decision making was all over the case, and his memory of anything else is so detailed and so specific. He's so bright. He knows exactly what he's saying and what he's not saying. That is totally unbelievable that he doesn't remember, and it's quite convenient not to remember anything of that case.
Yeah, I certainly didn't believe it. I mean, there was a few other things that he claimed to have no knowledge of, which I just didn't believe at all. Like, he didn't believe that he claimed that he didn't know. He never knew that John Dines had targeted Helen Steele. After he'd already said that he was aware that she was pursuing him afterwards, but he said he only knew about that after the inquiry. Quite ridiculous.
Yeah, and so my particular interest is in this inquiry is exposing the collusion between the police and McDonald's, which both led to and also undermined the McLibel case that I was involved with, the longest case in history, by the way. And John Dines was reporting on the legal advice that we were getting from Keir Starmer, as it happens, who was advising us for free. And the collaboration is absolutely nailed down that it was going on. Dines, for example, it's a long story, but basically the collusion between McDonald's and the police is completely unarguable, but nobody's willing to admit who was actually doing it, who was speaking to the head of security of McDonald's, who was in charge of the infiltrators into London Greenpeace, the McDonald's infiltrators, who were there at the same time as John Dines was in London Greenpeace. They knew each other. But who was speaking to Sid Nicholson, who was in charge of that, and then became in charge of the court case throughout its whole 10-year existence? And that we cannot get to the bottom of. He claims he knew nothing about it, funnily enough. But his junior, but high-ranking, but junior to him, officers were saying, well, this must have been approved at commander level. So we've now had commander level, and he knew nothing about it. So we presume it must have been higher up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. One thing that he was very clear about, and that nobody has said with so many words, that of course intelligence was shared with not only McDonald's but with other companies that were at the end of a political campaign or an activist campaign. And of course, if there was a public order danger or there was a danger for people in the street or whatever, he was exaggerating all the time. But this was the first time that he said that, of course, Special Branch would inform them. Routine. It's although we have been asking for this, for confirmation for this for many times, nobody was really sort of wanting to say it. And he went well, what are we talking about? Of course we did. And that is something we learned today, really.
Yeah, he referred to it as best practice. He seemed annoyed that there's the suggestion that it was somehow a commercial transaction that was taking place between the police and these private companies. He was like, oh no, it wasn't that. It was just best practice.
That's because in the document, he wrote a document about this liaison with companies and corporations while he was commander, and he used the words, they provided a consultancy service. That's his words. So that's why, that's been quoted elsewhere by other people to say, oh, they provide a consultancy service. It's not necessarily meaning that they were being paid, but they were acting as if they were being paid. They were providing what the clients were asking for. And what are the clients asking for? They just want, information about people challenging and criticising their business, such as McDonald's. It's not just about public order issues. It's like, well, this court case could be huge reputational damage to McDonald's. Obviously it was, globally. So it's exactly the kind of things McDonald's would want them to keep reporting on to them.
Yeah, reputational damage, just to segue into that. I mean, this was a thing that came up again and again today. He talked a lot about, the importance of protecting the reputation of Special Branch, the reputation of the police, the reputation of the Home Office, the reputation of the government. When he was ever presented with any kind of concerns about SDS officers breaking the law, about them misleading courts, all the consideration of intervening because of them getting engaged in deceptive sexual activities. He just came back to this. What was about the reputation? That was the thing to be concerned about. And he was asked, should the women have been told? So, well, you have to think about the reputation. It was all about the reputation.
Yeah, and that was really, really bad. That sort of he also said the SDS has had to sort of act within the law or act within the guidelines, where there were hardly any guidelines and no law, as he had explained to us, really. So that's it was up to the SDS to sort of think what their limits were, and as we've seen over the years of that the inquiry has been going on, there were no limits and there were no moral restrictions, there were no ethical restrictions. They just did whatever they wanted to do, and whenever that was on the verge of coming out, it wasn't even the welfare of the officer involved, or and no less the women involved or the wives of the officers. Let's not forget that. It was always the reputation of the SDS and everything above that. Let's keep everything, just shove everything under the carpet. Let's deal with it internally, because we can't have an inquiry. We can't have the spotlights on this. And then it's very funny to see that. When we talked about that in the final bit of today, is True Spies. The Peter Taylor, famous investigative journalist, 3-part series in 2002 about not just about the SDS, but also about informers in MI5, but the first sort of public exposure of the SDS. Ben Gunn now says that he did not approve at all, but I have I've studied that before, and Ben Gunn was the one sort of who approved of it. He now says as an act of damage control, but he's been having a lot of criticism because he approved that the SDS would be discussed. He trusted Peter Taylor, and what we could make of it, he was very angry about what it turned out to be, because it exposed the SDS. And he also said that it exposed stuff that shouldn't be exposed. And he also said that he managed to keep some stuff out of the program that would have brought down the government. We go okay.
Now we don't know what that was. Yes. Sorry, dear. No, we don't know what that was, but something obviously absolutely, mind-blowing that was actually removed from that program. So, or it's hyperbole from Dennis Ben Gunn. I mean, there was a lot of things that he said today that just sounded a bit over the top. He talked about if this came out, there'd been rioting in the streets and so on. There was a lot of things where he claimed, for example, he was asked about the infiltration of justice campaigns. He went back to this collateral intrusion defence, which we've heard from the police for many years, that there was no targeting of justice campaigns or social justice movements or police accountability. It was all because there were extremists slouching on, and that there was collateral intrusion that took place that shouldn't have, but that's the only reason it happened was because of the extremists. He was also asked about racism within the unit. There were some specific examples he was given. He claimed he never saw any racism ever, not at all, not in his entire time in the police did he ever witness any racism. He didn't deny that it existed, but certainly that he had never been privy to any of it. I mean, these things in both cases just not credible in any sense of the word.
It kind of shows how much he lives in his bubble still, And in spite of saying that he was never involved in his role in a very sort of direct way with the SDS, he kept speaking about we when he was talking about the SDS. He very much sort of incorporated. It was his identity. It's the special branch identity. There was one time I mentioned that before during the break, where he was asked, like, if he would have known about the relationships with unsuspecting women, how high would it have gone up? And he was asked, like, and then it came to the commissioner, and he said, I don't know. And then he was told that Peter Imbert was the commissioner. Oh, yeah, but he's ex-special branch. He would have been trusted. Yeah, he would have heard it. So that kind of tells you something about how the Met works. Like, you're either part of the clan or not. You're either a Mason or not, probably. But it tells you very much about how that work, and there were many more of that sort of. It's not even slips, but sort of things you can conclude about how he talks about things and what he says.
Yeah, I think something that I thought was quite sinister, but good to hear from him, is that he's really pleased that the government brought in some laws 2 or 3 years ago to say that undercover operatives can commit criminal offences of all kinds and and they shouldn't be prosecuted for them. They have protection under the law, which is a highly controversial piece of legislation to bring in during an undercover inquiry when we're kind of pushing back against this, shocking units and practices. And he also said that he wanted subversion to be made illegal. Now, subversion is if you're thinking that actually you'd like to, improve society and make a better society, therefore you're a subversive. He wants to make that illegal. That's like thought crime, basically. And this is the police for decades are pushing for more and more laws to give them more and more powers to suppress, those that actually want to make things better and protest and campaign about it. So, but actually we're doing the opposite. We've exposed the secret state and the attitude of the authorities to dissent, basically active dissent or effective dissent, and we're pushing it back, but they're still pushing it. They want more powers, and so I think that this inquiry is a very important focal point and platform for us to progress and draw our own conclusions and campaign around in the future.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add about that? Okay, so eagle-eyed watchers of the inquiry will realise that Ben Gunn's evidence is out of order. It should have been really part of Tranche 2. The rest of this tranche is related to stuff that happened after 1993. So we'll be going back to that. The next hearing is on Thursday. It'll be an earlier start of 9 a.m. We'll be hearing from Ellie, who was deceived into a long-term intimate relationship by James Thompson, followed by Wendy, who was a woman who was also deceived into a long-term friendship by James Thompson. So tune in for that. I'll do a Twitter Spaces this evening. Tune in if you're able to do, and please share any of these videos or anything else about this topic if you can. Bye for now.